a structure. He would just have to deal with how to complete his development on the queen side, but it should be completely fine. Should also be noted that after knight takes e5, knight takes c3, if knight takes c6, this doesn't actually work, because now after knight takes d1, knight takes d8, black can actually throw in a check with bishop takes f2 check. And after rook takes f2, knight takes f2, king takes f2, rook takes d8, if we do a quick body count, we can see that black is an exchange up with a winning position. So that doesn't actually work. So black can actually just play bishop c5, it seems, without worrying too much. Okay, so castles d3. And in this position, Fabiano played a very sensible move, played the bishop back to b6. Because now even ideas with d4, this fork, don't work. So knight takes e5 definitely doesn't exist in the position. Vishy played bishop d2, and what we actually have now is a reversed dragon, a kind of classical dragon that we would see normally 3 bishop c4 and bishop b3. This was kind of quite a big weapon for John Ems, Grandmaster John Ems, who actually recently came very close to winning the British Championships this year. Had a fantastic tournament, John, there. And he used to play this with colours reversed, with normally quite good results, but it was never really seen as the main threat against the dragon. So after bishop d2, white's trying to get his rook to c1, very standard stuff with the dragon, and he's basically asking black, what are you going to do next? And Fabiano played, again, a very, very natural move, the move bishop to g4. Apparently this position has been played with these colours in a correspondence game, and black played knight takes c3 in that position, and after bishop takes c3, f6. This looks also very, very reasonable, really making sure that this e5 pawn is protected, and d4 is quite difficult to organise, and black drew that game quite easily. So that's definitely another way black could play this position. But bishop d2, bishop g4 was Fabiano's choice, rook c1 by Vishy. Now he did take on c3, bishop takes c3, and instead of playing f6 now, decided to protect the pawn with rook e8, also very, very sensible. So far there's not really that much to comment on in terms of, critical moments in the game. Now Vishy had to come up with a plan, and he decided to play the move pawn to b4. Looks also very reasonable. And in this position, well, the idea, of course, is to kick this knight away with b5, after which the b7 pawn might feel a bit tender in some lines. So black played queen d6 in response. He could have tried a5, after which b5, knight d4 was quite interesting. And after bishop takes d4, e takes d4, a4, something like this could have been a possibility where white finds himself in a slightly, not awkward position, because this backward pawn on e2 is well protected, but it's quite difficult to get things going. This bishop is actually quite a bad bishop, but it does perform a role of protecting d4, and black can build up pressure here. Queen d7, rook e6, maybe double on the e file. I don't think white is any better, though, really. I think it's probably about level. But Fabiano decided to go queen d6, ostensibly also with the idea of after a4 going a5, with similar ideas to what we saw before. But instead Vishy here decided, you know what, I'm going to reroute my knight with knight d2. Now that the queen is on a square that can be attacked, such as c4. Well, Fabiano removed his queen. Should be pointed out that knight takes b4 really doesn't work here, because after bishop takes b4, queen takes b4, falls into a nasty skewer along the fourth. So queen h6 was Fabiano's choice. This was his original idea, by the way, with queen d6. He wanted to post queen on an aggressive square here. Also seemed very, very reasonable to me. And after knight c4, decided to play the move queen h5. So he's kind of got his queen to a very active position there on h5, looking at e2, perhaps hinting at a bishop h3 kind of exchange, because this is a very good bishop on g2, removing a defender of the king. But anyway, queen h5, and now Vichy decided to defend the pawn with rook c2. Maybe not the most accurate. Maybe he could have gone for rook e1, but I do understand why he didn't do that, and that's because f2 can sometimes feel a bit tender. Rook c2's kind of feels a bit awkward, that rook there somehow as well, but doesn't throw away the position or anything, but might throw away a bit of the advantage, because now after rook a d8, black has got a serious threat of going e4, and how can black be worse here? I mean, Fabiano has basically solved all of his problems. He's got his rooks in the centre, he's got his queen active on the right side of the board. He's just doing marvellously here. It's absolutely fine for black. Well, Vichy decided, I have to get rid of this active bishop on b6, knight takes b6, and Fabiano correctly captured with the c-pawn. A takes b6 would have been wrong. We're normally taught to capture towards the centre, of course, but A takes b6 in this particular position would be a mistake, because after b5, c7 is a permanent weakness. So c takes b6 actually eradicates that problem. And now White, also again having to face this e4 idea, decided to go f3. Probably not his favourite move in the world, but maybe necessary already, because you had to stop this e4 idea. Fabiano retreated with bishop e6, and now Vichy played queen d2. Still, the position is about level here. And here, I suppose Fabiano's got a bunch of very good moves. He played the move b5. I feel like this was a bit lazy from his side. If it wasn't lazy, then he underestimated White's next move, because queen d2 did have an idea behind it. For example, Fabiano could go knight d4 here. This looks very, very logical to me, just hitting this rook. And you don't want to go bishop takes d4, because after the simple e takes d4, you've got a really, really nasty pawn, backward pawn on e2, and you've got this weak square on e3, and this bishop is very bad. So I don't like taking on d4. So after knight d4, you probably have to go back rook cc1, and now you can follow it up with a move like bishop d5, and yeah, if anybody's for preference, I think it's probably black, to be honest. Also, black could have just played more solidly with a move like f6, just overprotecting the pawn in the centre, and yeah, just keeping things very fluid, very nice for him. The problem with b5 is it doesn't have a direct threat. I mean, I understand why he wanted to do it, because he didn't want to allow b5, but then again, knight d4 is always coming, so maybe this was a waste of a move, because after b5, actually this allowed a very powerful move by Vichy, the move pawn to f4, opening up this diagonal, and potentially opening up this diagonal for the bishop, so a multi-purpose move, and very much in line with how we view the theory of the two bishops. You want them to have open diagonals in an open position. So after f4, probably now was time for Fabiano to start thinking about, you know, neutralizing some of the pressure that White could build up. And the move he played definitely wasn't the way to do it. He could have played bishop h3, just exchanging one of these bishops, and that looks very sensible, because after takes, 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 and takes, I don't see this being a major problem for Fabiano at all. So bishop h3, potentially he could have taken as well, and after takes here, maybe go f6, blunting out this diagonal, and then again threatening to go bishop d5 or bishop h3. So that was definitely an option, but the move Fabiano played, bishop g4, was probably a mistake, because after a very good move, bishop takes c6, b takes c6, f takes e5, Vichy actually decided to part with his bishop to win the pawn in the centre, and basically say that, well, yes, my light squares are a bit weak around my king, but you can't really take advantage of that so easily. And a pawn is a pawn, and look what you've got here. You've got a backward c-pawn, and I'm happy. But actually, Fabiano had interpreted the position after bishop g4. I'm sure he saw bishop takes c6. He wanted to play the move f6, so this was really the essence of his play. But unfortunately for Fabiano, Vichy saw one step further, because the move f6, I mean, at first sight, you really don't want to go e takes f6, because after rook takes e2, queen takes h2, mate is in the air, and yeah, from afar this looks like you could just be losing, right, with white. But Vichy, well known for his extremely strong calculation, actually solved everything, because f6 actually is a blunder, because we got this position in the game. Well, here white only has one move, and that's to play pawn to f7 check, and black only really has one response, and that's to go king f8. Queen takes f7 can just be met by rook takes f7, and if rook takes d2, rook takes g7 check is a very important intermediate move, winning a rook. So e takes f6 was a brilliant calculation, and king f8. And this was the position, basically, I believe both players arrived at in their calculation. And Fabiano perhaps believed that the ensuing attack wasn't sufficient for Vichy, or at least not sufficient for a decisive advantage, whereas Vichy thought it was. Because after king f8, we have a situation where, well, look, white has to do something about this double attack. Attack on the queen, queen takes h2. Clearly, any queen move is just mate. So white really only has one move here, and that is to play the move bishop takes g7 check. Not a desperado attempt, quite far from it, because this pawn is very close to queening as well. So bishop takes g7 check. Well, black has only two moves, king takes g7 or king e7. King e7 is actually quite interesting, but I believe that Vichy in this position would have queened the pawn, check, takes, and king d7. And here, at the very minimum, he could take this rook on e2, because after bishop takes e2 here, and rook e1, bishop to g4, if we do a little body count again, we can see that white has actually got two rooks for the queen, and on top of that, after bishop c5, this king is in tremendous danger. There are no checks to the white king, and actually white is just going to line up his rooks and try and deliver mate, like so, and this king is practically in a mating net. So king e7 isn't sufficient, so you had to take the bishop on g7. Fabiano had to take the bishop, I should say. And here, again, the reason behind this move is now that the queen has room to slide out to c3 and give check. Now, this is where perhaps Fabiano had a sudden cold shower, psychological cold shower, because I'm sure that his original idea was to play queen e5 in this position. And the point is that after queen takes e5, well, that's not sufficient, because rook takes e5 and, you know, white's attack doesn't go anywhere. This pawn is not queening or anything. So you have to take on e2. This was, for sure, Vichy's idea. And after queen takes e3, to play the move rook e8. Quite a stunning idea, actually, to block the 8th and now threaten to queen. Well, Fabiano only has one move here, queen d4 check. Vichy has to block with the rook, with rook f2. And now it's important to play queen takes b4. By the way, including this check rather than going queen takes b4 immediately will become apparent, because in this particular position white can play rook takes d8, and actually after queen c5 check king g2, queen c2 check rook f2, black has got no more checks, and white is just going to be queening this pawn on the next move. But in the actual position, by giving the check first and distracting this rook from the second, and now taking on b4, now in this position, if rook takes d8, well, this is fine for black, because he can now give a check on this square here, rook f1, queen e3 check, and it seems as though he holds the balance here, if I'm not mistaken. Or am I getting something wrong here? Yeah, well, I'm not getting something wrong, am I? Yeah, because after king g2, queen e2 check, I believe after rook f2, can he go bishop h3 check? I believe this is the idea. beautiful little perpetual idea with check. I'm sorry, I'm going completely bonkers. What was the idea after rook f2? Let's have a look here. So maybe you can go bishop f3 check rather than bishop h3. Maybe bishop f3 check. Bishop f3 check might actually win. Because if king g1, queen e1 check, here check. I can just take the pawn. Of course, now that I blocked the check on the f file, I can just take the pawn. That's what I was trying to figure out. Precisely. So the point is, including this check on d4, distracting this rook from the e line, allows all of this to work. So queen d4 check, rook f2, queen takes b4. So rook takes d8 doesn't work. So white would have to play f8 equals queen. Black would capture this queen, and white would capture here, and now black would play rook takes d3. And I'm sure that both players arrived at this position. And after rook g8 check, looking at this bishop, king f7, you still can't take it. Rook e8, f8 check, king e7, like so. Rook a8, and now h5. I'm pretty sure that both players got here as well. And believe it or not, after rook takes a7, king e6, we arrive at a really funny ending where it's really unclear, in my opinion, what's going on. Black is the exchange down, a pure exchange down, but this bishop is so fantastic because it can just post on d5. And it's really unclear how on earth is white going to actually break this fortress. And on top of that, he has to be a bit careful about losing this a-pawn, and then suddenly these guys start walking down the board. So I don't think Vichy really was relishing this particular outcome at all. And I believe that actually after king f7 in this position, rook to d8, I think Fabi would have gone for this of course he would have gone for it, because the variation that he played in the game was just losing. But in this position, I believe after rook d8, he thought this was just losing for black, because after takes, this position with a pair of rooks off is a lot more difficult to defend, because the king comes in really quickly. You're going to win the a-pawn. And this is unpleasant to defend with a pair of rooks off. But after rook d8, the move bishop d7 is a really strong backwards move that even the top players can miss evidently. And actually after bishop d7, once again, the position is very unclear, because how do you break through here with white? It's not clear to me and to my eyes at all. So bishop d7 was a move that Fabiano, if he was in really good form, would have spotted, but it seems that he wasn't. So after thinking for a long time here, Fabiano ended up playing the move rook e5, which is the other way to block this check after queen c3 check. And a lot of people here actually were like, well, actually, isn't this good enough? Because I blocked the check, f8 queen is not a threat. What can I do here? And the next move is perhaps the most brilliant single move from the entire Sinquefield Cup, because Vichy had foreseen this, and he played the beautiful queen to d4. Stunning, stunning move. Why is this such a great move? Well, because you keep the pin on the rook for a start, and you try and deflect this rook away from f8. And if rook takes d4, f8 equals queen, check. And mate is a very simple mate. And if you do nothing here, let's say you go rook f8, then suddenly rook c5 is actually just picking up the rook thanks to the pin. So queen e4 is brilliant, and in fact after queen g5, Fabiano's idea, you can go rook c5 anyway, and white is completely winning, because if queen e3 check, well, now I can just take that if I really want, and if I really want I can just go rook g5 and pick up this bishop. That's one way of winning. There may even be other ways. And after rook c5, rook takes d4, as happened in the game, even though after check, king g6 is no mate on f6 immediately, queen f7 check is good enough to seal the point. Because after king h6, rook f6 check is all she wrote. Will be mate in just a couple of moves. So this queen d4 shot by Vichy, absolutely brilliant to see this so far away, and really was an illustration of just how on form he was in this tournament. So a brilliant game by Vichy, and just goes to show as well, if you get a bit lazy and a bit complacent in certain middle games, we saw how just in this position over here, Black was just absolutely fine. And then 4 moves later, White had a pawn on f7. So really, you have to be careful in these middle games to try and be as precise as possible. I think that's the lesson learned. The next game that I'm going to analyze for you guys today was played just last night in the first batch of the rapid games of the Sinquefield Rapid game tournament, where of course the one and only legend, perhaps the greatest player that ever lived, Garry Kasparov, has returned after a 12-year hiatus from chess, coming out of retirement, really I'm not sure his exact motivation to play in this tournament, but clearly the fact that it's not classical, it means it's a bit less pressure on Garry, and perhaps he missed it, perhaps he missed playing, and he actually started the first day with 3 draws. He was very close to beating Hikaru, though, with Black, had a fantastic position. But for me, the game of the day was the game between Levon Aronian and David Navara. And Levon started with d4, his main move, and we had a mainline Queen's Indian b6, g3, with bishop a6. Okay, so all been seen many times. And here, a bunch of moves, Queen c2, Queen b3, Queen a4, b3, all been played, and Levon plays b3. This seems to now be the main line. Bishop b4 check, bishop d2, and bishop e7. All been seen many times. So Black gives this check on b4 to basically say that, do you know what? Your bishop is worse placed on d2. It would rather go to b2 in some lines, and the queen would rather exert more pressure along the d file. Knight c3, castles, and bishop g2. Many times this position has been seen. And after d5, in this position, White can often throw in a very quick knight e5 because the long diagonal is obviously open. So that's often one way, and Black often challenges this knight with a move like knight f to d7, or dropping the bishop back to b7. Also, I should point out that in this position, the move e4 is a very well-known move, taking advantage of the fact that Black has castled before he's gone d5. And now after d5, White can take on d5 like c takes d5, bishop takes f1 here, and after king takes f1, e takes d5, and now e5. This has been seen in quite some games, and with a good score for White. But Levon decided to play it safe with this bishop g2, d5, and in fact he opted for the move c takes d5. So this has also been seen. Black recaptured, and White castled. Pretty standard stuff. And now Black played rook e8 here. I think it's the second or third most popular move. Bishop b7 is also a popular move here because the bishop really needs to start controlling squares along here. But rook e8, okay, been played many times. And in this position, Levon decides to play knight e5. Queen c2 is another very standard idea, but knight e5 immediately, for me, makes perfect sense. And David does come back with his bishop to b7 now. So, pretty standard stuff. And once again, White plays what looks like a very normal move. I think most White players here play the move rook to c1, because I'm looking at this c6 square and I'm looking at the c7 pawn, and sometimes were this knight to ever jump, after knight b d7, let's even say knight b5 immediately, maybe this poses some small practical problems for black, because he can't go c6, and if he takes on e5, d takes e5, you are losing c7 by force. So rook c1 I think is the most popular move in this position, but queen c2 can hardly be bad with similar ideas. Hence why in this position David Navara played c5. This position has been seen before, in fact. Well, now that the queen has moved from the d file, we can't really leave this pawn hanging here on d4, so we have to take on c5, b takes c5, and now the idea behind Levon's move, queen c2, is now revealed, because now you can go rook a d1. So the rook posts on the semi-open file looking at this queen, and there are all kinds of tactics revolving around this this d5 pawn. Lots of pins possible, and David Navara plays a very logical move, in my opinion, to move queen to c8. He is sidestepping the attack on the c-file and giving this bishop protection, which can be very useful. And in this position, we've actually seen this game before between Wang and Sashikiran from China 2010. And in that particular game, Sashikiran played bishop g5. And after knight a6, well, the position fizzled out actually quite quickly. But instead, Levon played a much more to-the-point move, much more direct and a much more instinctively better move. He played the move pawn to e4, looking to open up the position before black completes his development. So it's very, very typical. And I think David responded correctly here with bishop f8, taking advantage of the fact the knight is momentarily unprotected. I think after e4, if you take on e4, I think this is just unpleasant. Something like takes, and if you exchange everything like so, this rook in the corner is unprotected, and white has got a better pawn structure, and he's just in a much more pleasant situation. Probably black has to go knight d7 here, and then you can probably take something like this, and probably a few moves to keep the advantage here. Maybe a move like bishop to c3, hitting the queen, putting the bishop on the long square. And I'm not saying this is game over, but this is just suffering for black. He's going to have to defend his weaknesses. White is so well coordinated, better pieces. So bishop f8 was a good response by David. And now Levon continues in his very, very aggressive but necessary way with the move pawn to f4. I like this very much. Once again, d takes e4. We get similar lines to what we just saw. So David played the move d4, and now white played the move knight to d5. This is an excellent jump, because after takes, in this position, black played a move that is probably fine. But he certainly missed the response by white. I mean, he didn't go knight d7 here simply because I think he was worried about the move bishop to h3 with this very annoying pin. But it seems that actually black can give the exchange here and play something like this, where these two pawns suddenly, and this fantastic bishop, compensate for the material given. And perhaps he's going to be following up with queen c6 very soon, and fantastic coordination between his pieces. So I understand why he played f6, also because he saw that after knight to c4 in this position, queen d7, black is doing absolutely fine here because his pawn may drop off the board. But the move that started everything, and really the first super critical moment here in this game, was just fantastic and typical creative Levon. He played the move rook d to e1 here. I remember watching this live and thinking, wow, this is such a great move. Because even though, objectively, it's, is good. The shock value of this is well, this is just a very unpleasant move to face over the board here. Because White's just saying, okay, you can have this. But now, look what I've got here. I've got 2 monster pawns, 2 rooks perfectly placed, and I've got 2 bishops. And look at your king side here. Look at who is defending this black king here. Not many pieces at all. And in fact, after knight d7, e6, Levon had calculated this, knight f6. The whole point of this variation is the following move. In fact, it wasn't the p-sec, but another sacrifice, this time another exchange sacrifice. Rook takes f6, absolutely brilliant stuff. And after g takes f6, queen f5, I'm sure Levon, who, this was a rapid play tournament, so he didn't have time to thoroughly calculate all the lines, but just went on gut here, just went on instinct and said, you know what, I may be a rook down here, but I've got 2 monstrous pawns in the centre. And moreover, this black king, as I just mentioned, is ready to be eaten up in various ways. The rook swing as well. And in fact, that's what happened. And it doesn't surprise me that David, in this position, just crumbled under the pressure. Believe it or not, queen c7 in this position may hold better than the game. But queen d8, as played, is kind of a logical move because you want to be able to stop these pawns rolling and perhaps bring this rook in to defend. But it just wasn't enough because after queen d8, rook e4 was another beautiful shot by Levon. The point being that any bishop takes d5 could be met by check, and white is just recapturing on d5 immediately after. So he can't do that. So after rook e4, now the threat is to go rook g4 check, king moves, and then bishop e4. And that's exactly what happened. There's nothing much you can do to stop that. Rook e7, rook g4 check, king h8, bishop e4. And once again, you can't take on d5. And white is actually just threatening to take on f6 or play the move rook h4. And in fact, after rook c8, perhaps taking on f6 isn't even best here, because after it takes on f6, perhaps black can defend with something like rook g7. But rook h4 is much more clinical, just saying, do you know what, I want to checkmate you. And in this position, the problem is after rook c7, I think this was originally David's idea, the point is now that I can just go queen takes f6 check. And now you can't block with the rook, because the queen is undefended on d8. And if you go bishop g7, well, there must be a whole host of ways to win this position. Rook takes h7 check, king g8. For a start, I can play rook takes g7. This is good enough, and I'm sure there are many other mates. So rook c7, queen takes f6 check, king g8. Again here in this position, white could just go rook g4 check with a similar idea as before, making use of the fact this queen is not protected. So after rook h4, David already, well, probably resigned to the fact that Levon just played a crushing, beautiful game, played king g8. But after rook takes h7, there was really, queen g6 is just winning. So he took on d5, he tried it, but queen g6 check, rook g7, and now a lovely little finish, queen h5 was good enough. There's no way to stop mate. In fact, David was sportsman enough alike to allow white to deliver checkmate on the board. And just a superb game by Levon, all really starting from this moment here where he played rook d1. And the instinct there and the feel just to know that this piece sacrifice followed up by the further sacrifice, it was an entire rook sacrifice in the end, was sufficient enough play, really goes to show how much of a great player Levon Aronian is. And just a stunning game, how everything flowed, queen f5, rook e4, bishop e4, all the tactics worked in his favour, and he made David Navara, who's 27-40, just look like your average club player. It was quite astounding, and really goes to show that when Levon is in the zone, he's almost impossible to deal with. So so there you go, ladies and gents. That is the 2 games for this week's show. I would suggest that you all check out the action here on the Playchess server of the second day of the Sinquefield Rapid Tournament, where the man himself, Garry Kasparov, we've got Sergei Karyakin, Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Levon Aronian, David Navara, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Lenier Dominguez, and Liam Lequang, who's actually surprisingly joint lead at the moment, all playing this tournament with Vishy Anand, I should point out. Don't want to miss out Vishy's name again. They're all going to be playing at 8 o'clock Central European time. Make sure you follow those games. Absolutely great games. And Gary himself, who had 3 draws yesterday, said today, you know what, I just wanted to get back into the feel of playing. I haven't played a competitive game in a long time. Today I'm going to be going a bit more all out. He's got 2 blacks. Going to be some amazing games today. Make sure you follow that. And I hope you enjoyed the 2 fantastic attacking displays today in this show. Make sure you join me next time, where I'll be looking at some more top level chess. In the meantime, make sure you browse the Chess Space store as well for my products that I have and some new ones that will be coming out very soon. Watch the space as well as all of my other co-authors here. But for now, I leave you with the fantastic Sinquefield Rapid about to start. Well, I say it's about to start, sorry, I beg your pardon. It's going to start in about an hour's time. And yes, you can check out all the games here on PlayChess. So until the next time, cheerio.